Divine Feminine, listen to this very carefully. Before union happens in the physical world, something very real must happen inside the Divine Masculine first. And it does not begin in his heart. It begins in his body. This is one of the most misunderstood phases of the twin flame journey because people expect emotional breakthroughs or romantic gestures. But what actually changes first is the way his nervous system holds reality. Before the masculine can stay present with truth, intimacy, and emotional responsibility, his body must stop operating from survival. And when the soul chooses alignment, the body is forced to reorganize. Divine Feminine, when the Divine Masculine stops running internally, the body loses its old regulation. The patterns that allowed him to disconnect, distract, suppress, and avoid no longer protect him. The flight response that kept him functional begins to collapse. This is not symbolic, it is biological. The body must learn a new way to feel safety without distance, a new way to regulate emotion without withdrawal, a new way to hold closeness without panic. And this transition is not smooth. It is uncomfortable. It is destabilizing, and it is deeply exhausting for him. This is why, right before union, many masculines experience sudden fatigue, emotional shutdown, low motivation, disrupted sleep, irritability, confusion, or the need to isolate, not because they are moving backward, because their nervous system is rewiring. Divine Feminine, the masculine body was trained to survive through control, avoidance, and emotional shutdown. Presence was never his safety strategy. Distance was. So when the soul finally chooses truth, the body does not immediately follow. It must unlearn an entire survival identity. That unlearning creates symptoms. And here is the part most people do not understand. You feel this shift before you see it, not through thoughts, not through signs, through your own body. You may notice strange emotional heaviness without personal cause, a different kind of tiredness, a subtle sensitivity, a quiet internal pressure, a feeling that something in the field is being reorganized. This is not empathy, it is resonance. When the masculine nervous system destabilizes, the bond transmits the transition, not the story. You do not receive his emotions. You receive the signal that his body is losing its old pattern. Divine Feminine, this phase is not romantic. It is corrective. It exists because the body must be capable of holding union before union can happen. A masculine who has not rewired his nervous system cannot sustain emotional presence, consistency, or vulnerability, no matter how much he loves. This is why the body becomes the final gate. The heart can open faster than the nervous system can feel safe. The soul can choose faster than the body can trust. So before union becomes possible externally, the body must learn how to stay. That is why withdrawal often appears here, not as avoidance, but as integration. The system needs space to recalibrate. Overstimulation would collapse the process. Divine Feminine, this is also why you must be prepared. Not to chase, not to rescue, not to interpret silence as failure, but to remain grounded. Because when the masculine body changes, the dynamic of the bond changes. The old rhythm disappears. The old emotional feedback loops collapse. The old tension dissolves. And something quieter, slower, and more real begins to take its place. This phase does not guarantee union. It prepares the body for truth. Whether that truth becomes union or becomes release. Before union, the masculine body must change. Because union is not an emotional decision, it is a nervous system capacity. Divine Feminine. Before union can exist in real life, the divine masculine must become physically capable of holding it. This is not emotional readiness. This is nervous system readiness. For most of his life, the masculine body learned safety through distance, control, distraction, and emotional shutdown. His regulation strategy was not connection, it was withdrawal. It was staying busy. It was staying in his head. It was staying unavailable. That survival structure worked until the soul stopped running. When the inner decision shifts, the body is forced to update its operating system, and the body resists change before it accepts it. Before union, the masculine body must learn how to stay present without collapsing into stress, how to feel emotion without freezing, how to remain close without activating threat, how to hold responsibility without dissociating. That is not psychology. That is physiology. Divine Feminine, this is why right before union, the masculine often looks less stable, not more. He may feel more tired than usual, less motivated, more emotionally flat or irritable, more sensitive to pressure, less able to multitask, more withdrawn, not because he is losing interest, because his body is losing the survival identity that once protected him. The nervous system does not let go of old safety patterns gently. It releases them through destabilization. What you are witnessing here is not emotional confusion. It is biological transition. The masculine body is learning that closeness no longer equals danger, but the body only learns through repetition and regulation, not through intention. That is why this phase feels slow. Divine Feminine, your biggest misunderstanding during this stage would be to measure readiness by his words or behavior alone. His nervous system may be doing far more work than his personality can show. The absence of outward movement does not mean the absence of internal restructuring. In fact, this phase often happens when the outer life becomes quieter. Less stimulation, less social distraction, less emotional drama. The body needs reduced load in order to recalibrate. This is also why many masculines isolate here, not to escape the bond, but because their system is overloaded by emotional proximity while it is still rewiring. You must understand something clearly. The masculine cannot force his body to feel safe. Safety is trained, and until safety is trained, presence feels threatening. Divine Feminine, this is why union cannot be rushed by love, desire, or spiritual intention. The body must be able to hold the new relational state without activating collapse or shutdown. And that capacity takes time. You may also notice changes in your own body during this phase. A different kind of tiredness, a quieter emotional field, a subtle grounding, a reduced urgency to reach out, a stronger pull toward your own life. This is not coincidence. When his nervous system shifts, the bond transmits regulation change, not emotional content. Your body recognizes that the dynamic is changing even before your mind understands why. This phase exists for one reason only: to prepare the masculine body to remain present where he once fled. Before union, the body must learn what the soul already chose. And until that learning stabilizes, what you are being asked to do is not wait. It is to remain regulated yourself, because your stability supports the field without interfering with his integration. The masculine body will change before union, not because he decides to, but because union demands a body that can stay. Divine Feminine, this stage is not emotional. It is neurological. When the divine masculine body begins to change before union, what is truly reorganizing is his nervous system. This is the deepest layer of his transformation, and also the slowest. For most of his life, his nervous system learned one primary rule: closeness is unpredictable, and emotional exposure is unsafe. Whether through childhood, past relationships, emotional disappointments, or identity conditioning, His body learned to regulate stress through distance, suppression, and control. That survival pattern becomes his default operating system. When the soul finally stops running, the nervous system does not celebrate. It panics. Because what the soul recognizes as truth, the body experiences as threat. This is the reason why, right before union, the masculine may look emotionally unavailable again, even after deep internal shifts. The body is not regressing, it is recalibrating. Divine feminine nervous system change is not linear, it moves in waves. The masculine may feel moments of emotional openness, followed by sudden shutdown. He may feel motivated one day and completely depleted the next. He may feel clarity and then confusion. This fluctuation is not inconsistency of heart. It is instability of regulation. His system is losing its old anchors, the mechanisms that once allowed him to feel safe. Avoidance, distraction, emotional detachment no longer regulate him. But the new mechanisms, presence, vulnerability, emotional intimacy, are not yet trained in the body. So the system enters a transitional state. This transitional state often expresses itself physically. Exhaustion without obvious reason. Heavier sleep or disrupted sleep. Reduced social tolerance. Lower stress threshold. Heightened irritability. Increased need for solitude. Difficulty concentrating. Emotional numbness alternating with emotional sensitivity. These are not psychological symptoms alone. They are signs that the autonomic nervous system is reorganizing how it processes safety, connection, and emotional load. Divine feminine, one of the hardest truths for you to accept during this phase is this: the masculine cannot emotionally show you what his body has not learned to sustain yet. Even if he loves you, even if he feels the bond, even if his soul is aligned, the body is the gate. A nervous system that is still wired for survival will sabotage closeness unconsciously, not because of fear in the mind, but because of threat perception in the body. That is why pressure, emotional demand, or urgency backfire here. They amplify the stress response and slow the rewiring process. This stage requires low stimulation and high internal integration. It is also why many masculines withdraw socially, simplify routines, and reduce emotional complexity during this phase. The system is conserving resources to reorganize. Divine feminine, while his nervous system is recalibrating, your nervous system often begins to feel calmer. The old emotional tension that once kept you scanning, waiting, and monitoring the connection softens. You may feel more grounded in your own body, less reactive, less pulled toward emotional interpretation. This is not detachment, it is resonance. As his system begins to exit flight mode, the energetic field no longer stimulates your vigilance. The bond transmits state, not story, not tension, not emotion. State. This is also why you must be prepared for slowness. Nervous system change cannot be rushed by love, logic, or spiritual understanding. It requires repetition of safety in the absence of threat. The masculine body must learn that emotional presence no longer equals danger, that learning happens below consciousness. Divine Feminine, this stage exists for one reason: to build capacity, capacity to stay, capacity to feel, capacity to hold emotional responsibility, capacity to remain present when closeness no longer triggers survival. Before union can happen, the masculine nervous system must be able to hold relational reality without collapse. And until that capacity stabilizes, your role is not to accelerate. It is to remain regulated, grounded, and self-anchored. Because your stability supports the field without overwhelming his integration. The body changes first, then behavior follows. Then life can align. Divine Feminine. When the masculine body enters this stage before union, the changes do not remain hidden inside the nervous system. They surface through very specific physical and emotional signals, not as punishment, not as regression, but as evidence that the old survival structure is dissolving. This is the phase where the body is asked to release identities that were built around emotional protection. And the body always releases through sensation. For many masculines, the first and strongest symptom is fatigue, not ordinary tiredness, a deep exhaustion that sleep does not fully resolve. This exhaustion comes from sustained internal stress. The nervous system is working continuously to update threat responses, emotional processing, and self-regulation. What used to be automatic no longer works, and what must replace it is not yet stable. The system is rebuilding while still operating. Divine Feminine, this is why motivation often drops here. The body redirects energy away from performance and toward internal integration. Productivity decreases. Social interest decreases. External stimulation becomes draining. The second major symptom is emotional flattening. mixed with emotional spikes. He may feel numb at times, disconnected, distant, unable to access emotion. Then suddenly feel waves of emotion that feel overwhelming, confusing, or disproportionate. This is not emotional instability. It is emotional recalibration. The nervous system is learning to allow emotional flow without triggering shutdown. Another common signal is sleep disturbance, either excessive sleep, fragmented sleep, vivid dreams, or difficulty entering deep rest. The subconscious becomes very active during this stage. The body processes unresolved emotional material that could not be accessed while survival patterns were dominant. Divine Feminine, irritability is also extremely common here. Not because of you, not because of life. Because the nervous system is operating closer to its threshold while it rewires. Small stimuli feel larger. Noise, pressure, expectations, and emotional demands become overwhelming. This is not character, it is capacity. The body has not yet expanded its tolerance window. Another signal is withdrawal. The masculine may isolate more, reduce communication, simplify social contact, spend more time alone, not to avoid the connection, but because his system requires low stimulation to stabilize. This withdrawal is regulatory, not relational. It is also common for physical symptoms to appear. Tension in the chest or stomach, headaches, muscle tightness, changes in appetite, digestive issues, shortness of breath, restlessness. These are not random. They are expressions of a nervous system reorganizing how it holds emotional stress. Divine Feminine, one of the hardest parts for you in this stage is this. You cannot soothe this process for him. Love does not regulate a nervous system that has not yet learned safety. Only the body can learn safety through repetition and internal integration. Trying to emotionally support him too much, explain the connection, reassure, or hold space verbally often overwhelms his system during this phase. Silence here is not disconnection. It is nervous system protection. And now, pay attention to what happens in you. During this phase, many divine feminines experience parallel sensations. Unexpected tiredness, lower emotional reactivity, stronger grounding, a quieter mental field, less urge to analyze the connection, a deeper focus on their own physical and emotional well-being. This is not coincidence. The bond transmits regulatory state. As his system destabilizes and restructures, yours begins to exit vigilance. You stop holding the field alone. Divine Feminine, these symptoms are not signs that union is delayed. They are signs that the body is becoming capable of holding what the soul already chose. Before union, the masculine must survive the loss of his old protection strategies, and the body releases protection slowly. This stage cannot be skipped. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be fixed. It can only be integrated. And when this integration stabilizes, something very important happens. The body stops resisting presence, and only then can real closeness exist. Divine Feminine, you feel this process in your own body first, because the twin flame bond does not transmit information. It transmits regulation. Long before thoughts, emotions, or decisions become visible, the nervous systems of both sides begin to adjust to the same field, and the one who has lived in perception rather than protection feels the shift first. You were never trained to survive by emotional shutdown. You were trained to survive by awareness. That is why your system reads coherence before form. When the masculine nervous system begins to reorganize, the field between you loses the old pattern of instability that kept you emotionally alert for so long, and your body responds immediately, not with excitement, with relief. For months or years, your nervous system learned to remain activated around the connection. You were unconsciously scanning, waiting, interpreting, holding emotional readiness. Not because you were anxious by nature, but because the field was unresolved. When his survival pattern starts to dissolve, that constant background tension disappears, and your body notices before your mind understands. This is why many divine feminines suddenly experience physical changes during this phase. A slower internal rhythm, deeper breathing, a softer emotional baseline, reduced urgency to check or reach out, a spontaneous return to bodily presence, a stronger desire for rest, grounding, and routine. This is not emotional detachment. It is nervous system release. Your system no longer needs to compensate for unresolved energy. Divine Feminine, this stage can feel confusing at first because it does not match what you were conditioned to expect. You may wonder if you are losing connection. You may question whether your feelings are fading. They are not. Your vigilance is. The bond is no longer stimulating your nervous system through instability. It is beginning to transmit regulation. And regulation feels quiet. Another reason you feel this first is because you do not block bodily awareness the way the masculine learned to. His body learned to override signals, to push through discomfort, to suppress emotion, to prioritize function over sensation. So his perception of change comes later, through breakdown of old coping patterns. Yours comes through sensation. Divine Feminine, this is also why you may feel emotionally neutral around him during this phase. Not cold, not closed. Neutral. Neutrality is the sign that your nervous system is no longer being driven by attachment anxiety. You are finally experiencing the connection without survival overlay. And this is exactly what prepares you for either outcome. If union happens, you meet it from regulation. If release happens, you integrate it without collapse. Your body is learning that your safety is not dependent on his behavior. And that is one of the final prerequisites for real union. Because union cannot exist when one nervous system is stabilized only by the other. Divine Feminine, you feeling this in your body first is not a spiritual gift. It is a physiological result of having remained emotionally open rather than emotionally defended. Your system is simply more sensitive to field change. That sensitivity is now serving you. And here is something very important to understand. When your body begins to settle, the masculine often feels the contrast more strongly. The absence of your unconscious emotional holding forces him to regulate himself. This is not something you do intentionally. It is something that happens naturally when your system releases responsibility. This is one of the deepest corrections in the twin flame dynamic. The feminine stops stabilizing the field for both, and when that happens, the masculine body is finally required to complete its own integration. This is why this phase feels like a turning point. The bond is no longer sustained by imbalance. It is reorganizing around self-regulation on both sides. And only a bond that can stand without compensation can move into real union. Divine Feminine. The escape pattern is not a personality trait. It is a bodily strategy. For the divine masculine, running was never only emotional, it was physiological. His nervous system learned very early that distance created safety. Withdrawal reduced overload. Distraction lowered emotional intensity. Control prevented vulnerability. The body associated disconnection with relief. So when people speak about the masculine choosing to avoid, they misunderstand what is really happening. The body reacts long before the mind decides. But before union, this escape strategy must collapse, not through will, through nervous system failure. Divine Feminine, The escape pattern collapses when the body realizes that its old regulation no longer works. The masculine may try to distract himself the same way. Work more, stay busy, avoid emotional conversation, keep emotional distance, rationalize, intellectualize the bond. But something changes. The relief no longer comes. The same behaviors that once soothed his system stop regulating it. This is one of the clearest signs that the body is shifting. Avoidance begins to feel heavy. Distraction feels empty. Distance no longer calms the system. Control does not stabilize emotion. The nervous system loses its escape valve. And when the escape valve stops working, the body has only two options: collapse or integrate. This is why this phase can feel so intense internally for him. Without the ability to run from sensation, emotion begins to rise directly into awareness. The body can no longer suppress emotional charge. Feelings surface not because he wants to process them, but because the body cannot hold them down anymore. Divine Feminine, this is not emotional awakening. It is physiological exposure. The system is learning to stay with sensation without dissociation. That is extremely uncomfortable for a nervous system trained in avoidance. This is also where many masculine experience a deep internal restlessness. They may feel unsettled in their own body, unable to relax, unable to feel fully engaged, disconnected from motivation, pulled inward without understanding why. This is not depression. It is loss of a coping identity. The body no longer knows how to protect itself the old way. And until a new regulation pattern is built, instability is unavoidable. Divine Feminine, this is also why this phase can create a temporary increase in withdrawal. Not because the escape pattern is working again, but because the system is trying to conserve energy while it reconfigures. The difference now is that withdrawal no longer creates relief. It only creates silence. And silence does not regulate the body the way it once did. This is the collapse. The escape pattern does not disappear gently. It loses functionality. And when it loses functionality, the body is forced to discover a new way to feel safe. That new way is presence. But presence must be trained. It cannot be forced. Divine Feminine, the collapse of the escape pattern is the final biological barrier before real closeness becomes possible. As long as running regulates his body, staying will feel threatening. When running stops regulating, staying becomes the only option. This is why this phase precedes either union or release. because the masculine must finally meet emotional reality without anesthesia. And what happens next depends on what he does with that exposure. This is not a romantic turning point. It is a biological one, and it is irreversible. Once the body stops finding safety in escape, it will never fully return to the old pattern. The nervous system has crossed a threshold, and after that threshold, only two outcomes remain: integration into presence, or disengagement with clarity. There is no longer space for unconscious running. Divine Feminine. This is the part almost no one understands on the twin flame path. The body is not following the heart. The body is protecting the nervous system. That is why, before union, the final gate is not emotional clarity. It is bodily capacity. A person can love deeply and still be physically unable to remain present in emotional closeness, not because of lack of feeling, but because their nervous system experiences intimacy as threat. This is the hidden reason so many twin flame connections fail to stabilize. The soul is ready. The heart is open, but the body is not safe. Divine Feminine, the masculine body learned safety through distance long before he learned how to love consciously. His regulation system formed during years where emotional exposure required protection. His body adapted by creating reflexes: shut down, withdraw, rationalize, detach, control. Those reflexes kept him functional, but they also prevented real presence. Before union, those reflexes must lose dominance, and only then can a new pattern take their place. This is why the body becomes the final gate. Because the nervous system controls access to vulnerability, emotional availability, and sustained closeness. The body decides whether it is safe to stay, not the mind, not intention, not spiritual understanding. This is also why you may notice that even when the masculine intellectually understands the connection, emotionally acknowledges it, and even wants closeness, something still aims to hold him back. That something is not resistance. It is protection. Protection that no longer fits his reality. Divine Feminine, the body will not open to closeness until it learns that presence no longer equals danger. And that learning cannot come from explanation. It comes from internal regulation, from learning to stay with sensation, from learning to breathe through emotional activation, from learning that closeness does not automatically lead to loss of self, from learning that vulnerability does not equal collapse. This is why this phase is slow. The nervous system does not upgrade instantly. It learns through repeated exposure to safety without overwhelm. Divine Feminine, this is also why your role changes here. You are no longer meant to hold emotional space for him. You are meant to hold your own regulation. Your groundedness matters far more than your words. Your stability matters far more than reassurance. Because nervous systems regulate in relationship, but they do not heal through rescue. They heal through self-regulation mirrored by safety. This is one of the most difficult shifts for the Divine Feminine. You were trained to soothe, to emotionally anchor, to soften the field. But now your self-anchoring becomes the medicine, not your emotional availability, not your patience, not your explanations. Divine Feminine, when you remain regulated, present, and self-oriented, the field stops compensating for his instability. And when the field stops compensating, his nervous system is finally required to complete its own integration. This is not punishment, it is correction. The body must learn that safety comes from inside, not from your emotional presence. This is what prepares him to meet you without dependency. And this is why the body becomes the final gate. Because only a nervous system that can self-regulate can participate in a mature union. Anything else is attachment. Anything else is trauma bonding. Anything else is survival connection. Divine Feminine, before union becomes possible, the masculine body must pass through this gate. It must learn how to remain open without collapsing. It must learn how to stay without freezing. It must learn how to feel without running. And until that capacity stabilizes, nothing external can move forward safely. The body decides when presence becomes possible, not desire, not timing, not destiny. Divine Feminine, this phase is not asking you to wait better. It is asking you to regulate yourself fully. The most important work for you now is not emotional, spiritual, or relational. It is physiological. Because the field between you no longer needs emotional holding. It needs coherence. For a long time, you unconsciously stabilized the connection. You held emotional openness. You softened tension. You buffered silence. You maintained energetic availability. That role is complete. Now your role is radically different. You must become unavailable to dysregulation, not to him, to the dynamic. Divine Feminine, what you must do now is remain deeply anchored in your own body and life, not as a strategy, as alignment. This means prioritizing sleep, routine, nourishment, movement, grounding and emotional boundaries. It means removing your nervous system from chronic anticipation. It means refusing to keep your emotional field open to uncertainty, not with bitterness, with clarity. You are no longer meant to keep emotional door open in case someone becomes ready. You are meant to become fully present with your own life. This is not detachment. This is regulation. Divine Feminine, your system must become a stable reference point, not a reactive one, not a waiting one, not a monitoring one. Your emotional field must belong to you again. This is what allows the bond to rebalance. If you continue to emotionally track him, scan him, hold space for him internally, or stay energetically available in anticipation, you delay the natural correction that his nervous system must complete. Because the field will continue to compensate for him. Divine Feminine, doing nothing externally is not enough. You must stop doing something internally. You must stop co-regulating his instability. You must stop emotionally buffering his avoidance. You must keep holding possibility open at the cost of your own presence. This is subtle work, but it is decisive. Your role now is to be fully regulated even when you feel uncertainty, even when there is silence, even when you do not know the outcome. This is not spiritual bypass. It is nervous system maturity. Divine Feminine, what supports his integration is not your emotional availability. It is your emotional independence. Your grounded presence communicates safety to the field without enabling avoidance. This is the paradox. The more you stabilize yourself, the less the bond is distorted by imbalance. And only an undistorted bond can move into real union or real release. Both require sovereignty. Divine Feminine, you must also be prepared for something uncomfortable. When you truly stop emotionally compensating, the masculine may feel the loss of external regulation. He may feel more destabilized temporarily. This is not regression, it is exposure. Exposure to his own unfinished regulation. Do not rescue that discomfort. Do not step back into emotional holding. That would only restore the old imbalance. Your nervous system is no longer meant to serve as his emotional stabilizer. It is meant to become your own home. Divine Feminine, your task is simple but not easy. Live your life fully inside your body, not in anticipation, not in imagination, not in projection, in presence. This is what completes your side of the journey. And when your side completes, the field has no choice but to reorganize. The connection can only evolve to the level of the least dysregulated nervous system. and that must now be yours. Divine Feminine. This adjustment in the body is what ultimately decides whether union becomes possible or whether the bond completes its purpose through release, not because love disappears, but because capacity becomes visible. This is the stage where the connection is no longer evaluated by emotion, longing, or spiritual narrative. It is evaluated by what each nervous system can actually sustain in real life. Union does not happen because the masculine finally understands the connection. It happens only if his body can remain present. When intimacy, responsibility, and emotional exposure are real. The final test is not emotional honesty. It is regulation. If the masculine nervous system can now stay open without collapsing into shutdown, withdrawal, distraction, or control, then closeness becomes possible without distortion. Union is not an emotional event. It is a physiological threshold. Divine Feminine. This is why many twin flames do not reunite even when both deeply love each other. Love is not the missing piece. Safety is. A nervous system that cannot hold closeness without triggering threat will sabotage the relationship unconsciously, even with the best intentions. So what does this adjustment determine? It determines whether presence becomes sustainable. If the masculine completes this bodily integration, the connection stabilizes. Communication becomes grounded. Emotional availability becomes consistent. The dynamic loses volatility. The intensity softens. Not because love weakens, but because regulation replaces adrenaline. And this is exactly what real union feels like. Quiet, stable, ordinary, and deeply real. Divine Feminine, real union does not feel like the journey. It feels like life. Now, if the masculine cannot complete this adjustment, if his nervous system continues to require distance, avoidance, and emotional shutdown in order to feel safe, then the bond must resolve differently, not through conflict, not through rejection, but through release. Release is not failure, it is correction. It is the nervous system choosing coherence over attachment. Divine Feminine, when release happens at this stage, it feels very different from separation. There is no chaos. There is no emotional spiral. There is no collapse. There is clarity. The emotional charge dissolves. The attachment loosens. The connection loses its grip on your attention. And what replaces it is space, breath, direction. Your life returns to the foreground. This is not loss. This is integration. Because the purpose of the bond was never to guarantee a relationship. It was to reorganize your nervous system around truth. around boundaries, around self-regulation, around embodied presence. Whether union or release happens, one outcome is guaranteed. You will not return to the old dynamic. You will not return to waiting. You will not return to emotional compensation. You will not return to instability. The adjustment in the body permanently closes that chapter. Divine Feminine, this is why this phase is so powerful. It is not about what you get. It is about what you become able to hold. And once your nervous system is anchored in itself, no relationship can destabilize your center again. That is the real union with yourself. And only from that place can any relationship, including this one, exist without distortion. This adjustment determines everything, not because destiny decides, but because capacity does. And capacity is now visible.